Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Batman Bloodstorm. Now, Bloodstorm is a graphic novel written by Doug Moench, or Moench. I was never really sure how to say that guy's last name, and this is illustrated by Kelly Jones, and of course published by DC Comics. Now, Bloodstorm was published in 1994, and this is a sequel to Doug Moench's 1992 graphic novel, Batman and Dracula: Red Rain. Now, both this and the first book are Elseworld stories. Now, the best way I can describe Elseworld stories are comic book stories that deal with a character from a particular comic book series. However, these stories are not set in the same continuity as those comic book series. Like, they're set in their own universe. Kind of like The Dark Knight Returns. The Dark Knight Returns was set outside of mainstream Batman continuity. That one was very much set in its own timeline. It's the same thing with a lot of Elseworld stories. They're kind of set in their own universe, and with Elseworld stories, the writers are pretty much given free rein to do whatever they want. Like, they could kill off a well-known character in an Elseworld story, or they could change a character's origin. Now, in the first book, Batman and Dracula: Red Rain, Batman actually battled Count Dracula himself. Now, I'm gonna give away a bit of a spoiler of what happened at the end of that book, if you haven't read it yet, but at the end of Batman and Dracula: Red Rain, Batman actually turned into a vampire himself, and as a vampire, battled Dracula and ended up destroying Dracula. So, in this story, Batman is now a vampire, but he's still going out and fighting crime, and throughout the story, he's trying to fight the urge to drink blood. But throughout the story, the urge to drink blood starts getting progressively more powerful, and it's getting to a point where he might not be able to control himself. So, what happens is, because Batman killed Dracula, all of Dracula's vampires are without a leader, so they're just living in the sewers and feeding off homeless people. But then the Joker comes along, and the Joker pretty much takes command of an entire army of vampires, and he then sends these vampires after mob families, and the vampires infect various different crime families in Gotham City, so now all these, mob families are actually vampires, and pretty much the Joker has taken command of not just an army of vampires, but pretty much Gotham's crime underworld. Now, Catwoman is also in this story, but since this story is set outside of the mainstream DC continuity, this story actually changes Catwoman's origin. In this story, Catwoman literally becomes a cat. She's a woman named Selina Kyle who gets chased by a vampire who turns into a wolf, and then this wolf bites her, but she gets away, and then she sees the full moon, and she turns into not a werewolf, but a werecat. She turns into this half-human, half-cat-like creature, and eventually she meets Batman, and together the two of them are now trying to stop the Joker and his army of vampires. And eventually in the story, Commissioner Gordon and Alfred end up becoming vampire hunters. Now, I really enjoyed Bloodstorm. I think I might have actually enjoyed this more than the first book. Like, in this story, you see the psychological toll being a vampire has on Batman, and you see Batman trying to fight the urge to drink blood, and you realize that blood for vampires is very much like a drug. And in this book, you just feel so bad for Batman. Like, you really do, because you see him throughout this story really become exactly what he hates. Like, he starts to become a villain himself by the end of this story. And the Joker in this story is genuinely creepy. Like, the way he's drawn, the Joker is really freaking horrifying looking in this story. But yeah, I definitely recommend Batman Bloodstorm. It's a great Batman story and a great vampire story as well. And if you've read the first book, Batman and Dracula Red Rain, and you enjoyed that one, I think you might enjoy this one even more. Now, there was a third graphic novel in this series called Batman Crimson Mist, which I have read, and that's going to be my next Batman review. So yeah, that's my review on Batman Bloodstorm, and bye.